From pop culture to politics, this is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth, a great day to thank God that we live in the United States of America. You could be in a place like the Islamic Republic of Iran, right? And what would that mean? A headline, just breaking news today: Iranian singer sentenced to 74 lashes for performing without a hijab. Okay, it wasn't just that her hair was uncovered. It was, but her shoulders were uncovered too, and her arms. And this is a very serious matter. And what's amazing right now is that the administration hasn't spoken about it, but we will, because it's an indication what kind of regime we are making a deal with. CBS News reports President Trump said today that Iran had fully and completely agreed to allow nuclear inspections. But Tehran said there were no plans for IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, for those inspectors to return to its bombed enrichment sites. Vice President J.D. Vance said Monday, he has returned to the United States now from Switzerland. He said Monday that UN inspectors could return as soon as this week. Well, they're not going to return unless they get the permission of the completely benighted, completely tyrannical and evil Islamic government in Iran. Iran's chief negotiator told state media today that the Strait of Hormuz will, quote, never return to its pre-war conditions, and that Iran will maintain control of the vital waterway. Okay, what does that mean? What that means is that Iran will end up gaining and getting more power after this war. In other words, if they are going to maintain the credit of the control on the Straits of Hormuz that they established during this war, if they're going to maintain that, then they are vastly more powerful than they were before the United States attacked them in February. It's an indication of a disastrous misfire in terms of not necessarily how we handled the war, but how we have been handling the search for an end to this war. Monday was yesterday, the biggest and busiest day for transits of the Strait of Hormuz since the war began, with 35 commercial vessels crossing the waterway. That, according to data from the maritime tracking firm Kepler. That is still only about a third of the pre-war traffic levels, but it likely does not include some ships that transited the strait with their locations, responders switched off. Meanwhile, there is also this. Heather Cox Richardson posts in her daily post, which is often very informative, and it's very good because it gives you context. And Heather Cox Richardson says it appears to be more and more clear that the Trump administration is mired in its own mistakes. There is no way to spin the memorandum of understanding that Trump signed last Friday at Versailles to advance peace talks with Iran. There is no way to spin that as a win. Trump deliberately shut off both Congress and allies from the decision to go to war, making the conflict his own. That means the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, which achieves none of the goals Trump claimed while at the same time giving Iran access to hundreds of billions of dollars, that responsibility belongs to Trump too. A wide range of U.S. commentators are calling the MOU a disaster and saying the United States lost the war. Losing another war, not a war that drags on forever, and that may be part of the problem with losing, is there was no long-term plan. There's a plan for getting into the struggle, but not a plan for getting out of it. It was never enunciated, and at least according to people from inside the administration, it was never apparently discussed before the bombing began. A wide range of U.S. commentators are calling the MOU a disaster and saying the United States lost the war. As Isaac Armsdorf and Karen DeYoung of the Washington Post reported, right-wing hardliner on Iran, Mark Dubowitz, said, quote, "The actual MOU is deeply flawed. The administration needs to stop defending it beyond stating the truth. It's a stopgap measure to resupply energy markets, lower gas prices, and help Republicans in the midterms." Do Republicans really need that much help? There is a piece in Rolling Stone magazine by Matt Bai, who's going to be joining us a little bit later in the show, that says the Democratic Party as an institution, as a political operation, is weaker than it has ever been. And Matt Bai says that's good news. We'll be speaking to him about why he believes that. Today, after a quick trip to Switzerland for talks with Iranian negotiators, Vice President J.D. Vance told reporters that Iran had agreed to allow international observers periodically to inspect its nuclear program. Vance called it a major milestone for the American people and the first step in permanently denuclearizing or permanently ending a nuclear weapons program in Iran. Trump heralded the plan. In fact, such inspections were part of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, negotiated by Obama in 2015, while Obama was president, of course. And the agreement that Trump tore up in 2018, and they continued at some sites the inspections until Trump ordered military strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities on June 22nd of 2025, a year ago today. After that, Iran refused inspections of the bombed sites. Inspections are good, but they basically just get us back to where we were before Trump took over. The administration today also waived sanctions on Iranian oil for the period covered by the MOU, as that document laid out, increasing the value of Iranian oil exports. In other words, another gain for Iran. On the Hill, they're talking more about Vice President Vance and his contradictory reports on what has been agreed to. Where we go from here, we'll also be talking more about this shocking story about 74 public lashes punishing a woman for singing a song without a hijab and with her arms uncovered. We will get to that and more on The Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, the more you think about it, the more significant, it seems to me, is this verdict in a court in Iran, a verdict of 74 lashes for performing without a hijab. Parastu Ahmadi and her band will also be barred from leaving the country, which I'm sure they would love to do, or performing in the country for 2 years. dampening hopes for a more moderate post-war regime in Iran. This is who we're dealing with. Why would it be that President Trump and Vice President Vance and Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth and all the rest of them, why would they put faith in promises from a government that is going to punish a young woman almost to death, and possibly it would include death, with 74 public lashes for performing without a hijab? You really want to trust a regime like this with nuclear weapons? Well, no, we're trying to get rid of nuclear weapons, but what's your proof of getting rid of nuclear weapons? The idea that they may have made a commitment to allow inspectors again. But does that deal with some of the enriched uranium that is buried underground? In any event, the story from the International New York Times says that an Iranian court has sentenced an outspoken female singer to 74 lashes for performing at a concert without wearing a hijab, a hair covering. That, according to a family member and state media news reports. It's reported in Iran. The punishment indicated a possible tightening of religious rules for women under an Iranian political order reshaped by war. The singer, Parastu Ahmadi, was sentenced last week at a closed trial in Qom province, along with 8 band and crew colleagues. In other words, the 8 band and crew colleagues, who are mostly male, are getting slammed as well, even though they are not even supposed to wear hijabs. A video of the 2024 performance, in which the singer's hair, arms, and shoulders are uncovered in defiance of Iranian law, went viral on YouTube. Ms. Ahmadi and her colleagues were also banned from performing or leaving the country for 2 years, and the family member who asked to remain anonymous, fearing reprisal for speaking to the media, said 2 of the 9 individuals sentenced were no longer in Iran when the verdict was announced. The sentencing came just days after Iran and the United States tentatively agreed to a months-long conflict that has agreed to end the months-long conflict that has killed thousands across the Middle East and sent shockwaves throughout the global economy. The government's crackdown on artistic expression and women's dress has dampened hopes among some Iranians for a more moderate post-war order. Besides being an inhumane and humiliating punishment, the 74 lash sentence against Parastu Ahmadi simply for singing without compulsory hijab is a dangerous signal that the regime, emboldened by the peace deal with the U.S., may intensify its crackdown on women, said Mahmoud Amiri Moghadam, who is director of the Norway-based Iran Human Rights Foundation. President Trump justified the war in part by saying the United States intended to help Iranians overturn their leaders. Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions, he wrote on social media in January. That month, the Iranian authorities responded to widespread protests by killing thousands, some people now estimate it was 50,000, of their own citizens. Raha Bahraini, a lawyer and an Iran researcher at Amnesty International, called it a state-orchestrated massacre. Now it is not clear that the war has left Iran in less restrictive hands than before. Ayatollah Khamenei's son, though you never see him, Mojtaba Khamenei, is the supreme leader. It was unclear when the authorities planned to lash Miss Ahmadi, remembered 74 lashes, and the other defendants Since 2022 protests, there have been multiple documented cases of the authorities whipping women accused of violating hijab rules or speaking out against them. Court documents released to the trial have not been made public. Well, obviously, you don't want to publicize something like that if you're an Iranian crazy. And that's what this is right now. This is crazy. Yesterday, President Trump was asked if he would risk worldwide depression and strike Iran again. This is the President of the United States, clip 24.
Or with Iran, it could cause a worldwide depression, as you noted, Mr. President. Are you willing to risk economic catastrophe and strike Iran
Well,
again?
not the way I'm doing it. It's not going to cause depression.
Yes, but if they don't abide by the
Well,
memorandum
nuclear
of
weapon
understanding.
supersedes depression. Depression is real bad. Nuclear weapon will cause depression much more quickly. The way we're doing it, we have the opposite of a depression. We're doing really well. The numbers are incredible. The oil is at a level that nobody's ever seen before. Oil prices are way down. I think they're very comparable to what they were, Chris. I don't know, pretty comparable to what they were before we started. Right?
They've returned most of the way back down.
Yeah.
No, so if Iran does not abide by the MOU, are you still willing
What I
for
didn't
strikes?
say
And
it
does
would
give you
cause
leverage?
a depression. I said it could cause a depression, right? And I said that I don't want to be Herbert Hoover.
Okay, Herbert Hoover was eligible for another term, and he ran for another term, and he was voted out of office and replaced by Franklin Roosevelt in 1932. But he doesn't want to be Herbert Hoover. You see, the difficulty here is if you are Iran and you're listening to this, isn't it clear that the president doesn't mean it when he threatens to resume bombing and attacks and destruction of Iran's infrastructure? We will get to more on that coming up on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, President Trump had a substantial post on his Truth Social website. And his message to the world this morning was, despite their protestations and false statements to the contrary, coupled with the drumbeat of the fake news, which is doing everything possible to make the U.S. victory, that's in capitals, as small and insignificant as possible, Iran, he says, has fully and completely agreed to highest level nuclear inspections long into the future. And he has, in parentheses, infinity with 3 exclamation points. This will ensure nuclear honesty. If they did not agree to this, there would be no further negotiations. Okay, the word infinity doesn't appear anywhere in the Memorandum of Understanding. And near does the term nuclear honesty appear there. But President Trump seems to have faith, much more faith than they deserve, in our interlocutors in the Iranian regime. If they did not agree to this, he says there would be no further negotiations. Yeah, that there's 60 days more of negotiations that we agreed to, and they also agreed to. Based on this and other major concessions being made by Iran, nobody knows what they are. I have agreed to allow the Hormuz Strait to remain open with no further naval blockade. However, all ships are remaining in place should it be necessary to reinstitute the blockade, which seems at this point highly unlikely. The money and or sanctions that the U.S. Treasury, writes Trump, is releasing goes into escrow controlled by the USA and will be used for the purchase of food and medical supplies exclusively from the United States, including corn, wheat, and soybeans from our great American farmers. These are things that are desperately needed by Iran. This is a humanitarian crisis, and I feel it is necessary to help now before it is too late. Talks are going well. Thanks for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. And then they have a story in the New Republic about a press briefing today from the Iranian Foreign Ministry. These are the official people speaking for the foreign relations of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson, whose name is Esmail Bakai, denied the Trump administration's claim that the country would allow inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency to visit its nuclear-bombed sites. We have not had a meeting with the Director General of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, nor do we have plans for the agency to inspect Iran's nuclear facilities damaged by the U.S. and Zionist military aggression, Bakai said. Meanwhile, there's a perspective on this current situation from Jon Stewart about this latest strategy that Trump unveiled this morning about sending humanitarian aid to help the Iraqi public and to help make sure they're well fed. This is Jon Stewart commenting on his most recent broadcast, clip 20.
Are we getting anything in exchange for letting Iran have like $500 billion?
If there is any frozen Iranian assets that are unfrozen, the money would actually go to buy American soy, American corn, and American wheat for the benefit of the Iranian people. A classic Trump deal.
Oh, it is a classic Trump deal. Announce a bold action with grandiose ambition and then the bed and then state confidently that bed was the goal all along. And then finally, name the bed after Trump. Yes, folks, we went to war with Iran to force them to take money to buy our crops. Win-win. How did no one else figure this out? How did no other president have the foresight to bomb a country into a crop-buying spree?
Well, I think one big difference, Phil, is that we have a smart president, whereas in the past we've had dumb presidents.
Okay, that's the line of the administration. Morning Joe also had a perspective. Joe Scarborough, former congressman, he had on his Morning Joe program his perspective on the details of the Iran deal. This is clip 22.
You should not give the mullahs money before they agree to anything.
When you've lost the New York Post, as we pointed out a few times in the last week, I mean, this is not us saying it. It's the New York Post. It's Ted Cruz. It's Republicans all over the place saying you cannot turn over $10 billion plus the $300 billion investment fund, by the way, and pour that in and say, as J.D. Vance says, we hope Iran becomes a normal country.
Right.
We hope they do the right thing with all this money when the last 50 years have proven they will not.
We think if we give them money, they'll be Luxembourg, right?
No. The vice president saying how, in his words, cool it is that now that the U.S. and Iran are talking and there's a chance to normalize those relations when we know that the hardliners in Iran have only been empowered at the end of this war and they have no incentive to trust the American word again.
And there's nothing cool about giving $10 billion. You know, before it was like, oh, it's cool if they do the right things. We'll give them this money and we'll pay them $300 billion in reparations, more than the Germans had to pay at the end of World War I at Versailles. But, you know, Dire Straits had a line for this. Money for nothing and your chicks for free. Now, he may not be interested in the second part of that, but money for nothing.
Money for nothing? Mark Thiessen, who is a former speechwriter for President Bush, President George W. Bush, and is also a nationally syndicated columnist and somebody who has a reputation as a Trump whisperer. He's one of those people with a strong support for the Trump administration, but not so much on this cash infusion that we're providing for Iran. Here he is talking about it on clip 21.
And look, I think it's better that it go to American farmers than Iranian terrorist regime. And I understand that they're not going to give it to them until they've performed for it. But what about American victims of terror? There are more than 90 judgments against the Iranian regime of over $50 billion. Maybe we should make those people whole before we start giving money to the Iranian regime, even as part of a nuclear deal. And then the other thing is that we've lifted sanctions now for them for the sale of oil. Including in U.S. dollars. So they are going to get a major cash infusion during the course of this negotiation process. And that money isn't going to go to buy food for the Iranian people. It's going to go towards the reconstruction and rehabilitation of their regime.
Okay, is that something we really want to fund? That's a question on the table. There's also a resolution of a question by a federal judge concerning creating a new database of millions of Americans' private information about their citizenship status. We'll get to this issue and more coming up on The Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, Politico has the story. So do many other sources. But Politico reports that a federal judge has now blocked the Trump administration from creating a new database with millions of Americans' private information, including Social Security numbers and citizenship status, saying the administration had knowingly fed inaccurate data to states that are now actively and haphazardly purging purported non-citizens from voter rolls. The federal district judge, Sparkle Suknanan, wrote in a 75-page ruling, the federal government has knowingly trampled on the privacy rights of American citizens in a manner that threatens the sacred right to vote. A 75-page ruling that concluded this court cannot stand idly by while that happens. So who is Sparkle Suknanan? She was actually born in Tobago. She is of Indian ancestry, and she was nominated by President Biden during his brief presidency and confirmed twice by the U.S. Senate in fairly close party line votes. However, she's also a naturalized citizen of the United States and a U.S. district judge, a federal judge. So we will see if this case gets appealed. And this idea of creating a new database, which is idea that's very dear to the heart of President Trump, goes forward. There is also this. The Vice President, Vance, this according to The Hill, returned to the U.S. after spending the past few days in Switzerland for the start of talks to achieve a permanent end to the Iran war. The vice president led the talks along with U.S. Special Envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who, of course, is the president's son-in-law. Vance pointed to 4 major accomplishments he said were reached during the talks, including the creation of mechanisms to demine the Strait of Hormuz and the establishment of a process for technical talks that will follow for the next 60 days. He also touted that Iran agreed to permit inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency back into the country That was a system that was in place during the duration of former President Obama's 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. Tehran has not confirmed that it has agreed to the inspectors. Vance said the inspectors are expected to restart their work as soon as this week. We'll let you know, don't hold your breath. The launch of the talks kicked off the 60-day window for negotiators to reach a final deal to end the conflict and achieve a resolution on Iran's nuclear program. The vice president signaled efforts to reach a deal will continue in his absence. While Vance has largely been in the spotlight during the negotiations, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will visit multiple Gulf allies during a multi-day trip this week, planning to make stops in the United Arab Emirates, in Kuwait, and in Bahrain. Meanwhile, there is this. When President Trump criticized for years the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that was the Obama deal to try to stop Iran's nuclear program. President Trump hated that deal. And yet his deal right now, of which he's very proud, is vastly similar. Here's a flashback with President Trump on multiple occasions ripping the JCPOA that Obama had put into practice. This is clip 19.
That horrible Iran nuclear deal, that horrible, stupid deal. The stupidity of that deal, where we give $150 billion, we get nothing. The deal allowed Iran to continue enriching uranium. It also fails to address the regime's development of ballistic missiles. Who would make a deal so stupid as that? The dumbest deal I've ever seen, the worst deal ever negotiated of any kind.
The worst deal ever negotiated of any kind? I bet we could think of some even worse deals. And Scott Jennings had this to say, claiming that it would be a good thing if at the end of Iran negotiations, well, what? Here's his description on the air about what we are hoping to achieve. This is clip 14.
You said Donald Trump started this. You seem to have some amnesia about the fact that Iran has been at war with the United States for 47 years. And as the president said, he's finally the one that's dealing with it. They've killed thousands of Americans. They've funded terror proxies that have destabilized the region. They've been after us, chanting death to America for 5 decades. And you think that we just decided to pick on Iran for no reason this spring? This was long overdue. And if at the end of it, they don't have nuclear weapons, and at the end of it, we do have a stable Middle East, and at the end of it, we do have a situation where they're not funding terror proxies, terrorizing our friends and allies over there, that'll be a good thing.
Okay, he's right, of course. And but that's a lot of if this, if that. And the idea is that somehow that we have more faith in this set of inspectors who would be sent by the same agency as the inspectors who were very much disrespected by President Trump as part of the JCPOA. There is also big news today, I guess, about one of the most controversial commentators of the conservative side for many years has been Tucker Carlson. And he announced on a podcast that he was leaving the Republican Party. He also made clear he's not going to become a Democrat. That would be a little bit mind-bending if he were going over to the Democratic Party of AOC and Mamzani, but he's not. He announced that, and if I'm out, meaning out of the Republican Party, then I think a lot of other people are out. That's an indication that he's trying to lead people somewhere. But where? Carlson said he will not support the Democrats either. suggesting he is testing out whether MAGA voters, especially the anti-Semitic ones who embrace his attacks on Israel, will follow him when he splits from Trump, as he clearly is doing by leaving the Republican Party. That's a report in Axios. There is also Stephen Miller, who appeared on Fox News. We will get to that. And he basically talked about Trump's role in the midterms and suggesting that his boss, Donald Trump, is the Republican Party. And we will get to that and Stephen Miller's commentary. And the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, has been reacting to Trump's claim that she begged for his photo at the G7 summit. Fairly complicated, that this relationship with a allied head of state who at one point was one of Trump's biggest and most ardent supporters. There is also Donald Trump talking about protesters who are trying to defend the algae at the reflecting pool at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. That and more, plus Matt Bai coming up with his column in Rolling Stone suggesting that the Democratic Party is in worse shape than it has ever been. That covers a lot of ground. We'll get to that and much more coming up in This Greatest Nation on God's green earth.